You're listening to On the Way Home with your host, Emmy Kelly.
Welcome back to On the Way Home, the podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of housing, community, and belonging. I'm your host, Emmy Kelly. Today, I'm joined by Bailey Waukey, Strategic Advisor for Youth Engagement and First Nations Relations. Bailey's work focuses on youth reconciliation, collaboration, and designing strategies that help organizations create meaningful social impact using the strengths and knowledge they already hold. Through his leadership in Indigenous Youth Housing Strategy, Bailey is helping shift how systems listen, collaborate, and respond to the voices of young people. Let's listen in. Welcome, Bailey. Thanks so much for joining us on the way home today. We're so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. Happy to be here and looking forward to getting started.
So we always ask our guests our signature question, and we'll start there today. What does home mean to you, Bailey?
Oh, this is a great question. Home to me is certainly a feeling. I think home is something that we can kind of find in different places. But I think like at the bottom of that feeling is belonging. And I think, a lot of things kind of come into play. For me, I think of my grandma, like I've never lived with my grandma, but every time I went there, I always felt very welcome. And then it was like a home. Like there was never a time where you knocked on the door and she wasn't happy to see you, so that's what home means to me. It's like that grandma feeling.
That's so lovely. So to start us off, I was wondering if you would share a bit about your own journey. What drew you into working in youth reconciliation policy and strategy development and working in this space?
So it kind of started whenever I got the bug to boogie. I really enjoyed dancing growing up. I was a hip hop dance teacher at like age 15. And so I was really into like Backstreet Boys and stuff like that growing up. And I'd like perform and all this stuff like to myself, never show anybody. And whenever I started teaching dance, I was teaching a lot of like my peers effectively. Like they were maybe like a couple years younger than me. I taught some kids, some brothers age 3 and 5, but the most impactful group on me was these young boys. There were like 10 of them. They're 16. And we all just kind of like really got along. We all just like loved dance. We're so passionate about it. And this kind of created the environment for me to like try to be a good leader. And, I was a little bit older than them. So it kind of created this like, big brother, older cousin kind of vibe between us all. And that's what inspired me to do youth work. And so I went and for my college degree or diploma, I went into social service work. I started working in youth restorative justice. And as a social worker, I just felt like I was experiencing a lot of challenges that I could not overcome in the position that I was in, AKA the money and, the developments of the programs that we're administering. And so that's what inspired me to get into policy. There was also some folks like around like leadership of nonprofits that were doing policy initiatives. So I just kind of got inspired that way. And then I moved to Vancouver in September of 2021. And this was when I started a policy internship at the Aboriginal Housing Management Association. And yeah, that was like kind of the pathway to get there. And, 4 years later, you can't get rid of me. Everyone's just stuck now. And so, and then strategy development is kind of more like a recent thing, maybe in like the last 2 years or so. I've just become especially interested in like the process, the technical components of it. Like what is an actual strategy? How is it different from a plan? And how can I support our teams to think more strategically and develop strategies that are effective and people are like enthusiastic to follow through with and stuff like that.
I'm going to have a human moment. I left my dog outside and he's talking to come in. So I'm just going to let him in and I can still hear you.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you if like in your work, you help teams design responses that create positive social outcomes using the expertise they already have. What does that process actually look like in practice?
So it's a lot of co-creation, a lot of collaboration, and I try to bring forward a process that everybody can have their voice heard. And this would in turn mean that the best ideas are presented and voted on in an objective way, right? And so, but like, how do you actually get there, right? And so some of the things that I like to do is use a lot of sticky notes and markers as our voice. This is like a way to communicate rather than using up the time, democratically to go one by one for 5 minutes and use up an hour within a short amount of time, or not, or a short amount of people sharing. And so I try to like employ strategies where everyone can communicate at the same time through these sticky notes. We put them on the wall. We figure out what are duplicates, etc. And then we use other things like voting dots, get them to vote on these ideas. And it's really great because when we think of our typical strategy meetings, okay, everybody come into the Zoom, one by one, let's talk. It's people like me, people who enjoy public speaking, who get the privilege of dominating those conversations. And so that doesn't mean that someone like me has the best ideas though, and so my strategy development process is just about ensuring that everybody's voice is heard and ensuring that the group morale is enhanced by the end of the process. Like we have a lot of very smart people who are emotionally connected to this work in a room trying to decide the next steps on research and information that they might draw different conclusions on, even though they all accept the same facts. And so this is why the process is so important to like nurture the human side of it and make sure all the voices are heard. And so I try to embed co-creation as the part of the process.
That's amazing. And you often describe your role as taking the burden of collaboration off teams. Why do you feel that collaboration is so challenging in the sector, and how do you help to make it easier?
So if we think of like kind of like two factions of people, we have like convergent thinkers and divergent thinkers. I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of mixing them up. I'm just having a moment. I'm just so excited to be here. And but in one of these thinkers, they are somebody who can like think of a lot of great ideas like on the fly, like this, what about this, what about this, and they're all amazing. And then you have the other folks who want to take one idea and say, okay, well, how do we break this down? What are like the next options, this and that, whatever. And both are valid, and we need both of these types of thinkers in our groups. But to get them to agree on something, that is the middle part, right? If we're on the left, the start, the middle is the groan zone, as I like to call it, and then on the right is the solution. And so the burden of collaboration is that groan zone, like I don't really like that, like maybe there's a compromise because you just don't want to like talk about it and all this and that. And so I soothe the process, I nurture the process, I gamify the strategy development. Like I wouldn't say it's like fun, like it's still work, but we gamify it in a way where people enjoy doing it more. And when people enjoy the work and are having a good time and like feel like they're being heard, that's when the best ideas and solutions come through us, right? And so when we can also objectively measure the commitment in either way, not just like someone like me publicly speaking and like having all this these thumbs up just because people don't want to talk. Rather, we can see the voting dots on the wall to be like, oh, these are actually the ideas that people want to do. And for people who are a little bit more meek, they have the opportunity to shine in these environments. And that's like, once again, going back to the feeling of it all too, right? Like the burden of collaboration is really just ensuring that we can all focus on the thoughts, and the feelings are the parts that I take care of. And so like I don't try to like be an expert in the process, like I just like guide through it. Are you a Lord of the Rings fan, Emmy?
I have watched it and I did
Okay,
enjoy
okay. Do you
it,
know who
but I'm
Gandalf
not
is?
very good at movies and shows, just flagging.
I see, I see. Do you know who Gandalf is? Like the
Mhm.
wizard that goes along with them?
Yes, I
Yeah.
know at least that.
So yeah, so Gandalf is what I like in my role in like trying to facilitate strategy development. Like I'm just a guide, you know, like Gandalf could like give the answer, but like that wouldn't be conducive to the party's development and journey and process to getting there, right? Like, and they all like it all lived happily ever after in the end. So, so yeah, so you know, we want to be the guide, not the hero, and and yeah, so the burden of collaboration is just about ensuring that we have strong group morale by the end of it, and not be felt like collaborating is hurting our process.
Is there like a I'm just hearing you speak about kind of how you facilitate these journeys, and I know you're doing a lot of work around reconciliation and in the housing homelessness space and everything. Would you say there's like a breakthrough moment or achievement there that you can share with the listeners that you like reflect on that motivates you to keep doing this work?
Yeah, so I recently, well, whenever we were doing the Aboriginal Housing Management Association, when we developed the Indigenous Youth Housing Strategy, we worked with the steering committee members, and there's these five youth. They're amazing. They're across the country, or sorry, across the province, and we got to bring them together for a strategy development day with AMA staff. Like we were kind of doing like our typical yearly team gathering, and so I was given the opportunity to bring them in and like have like a half day where we did the strategy development, and I got to deploy the tactics that I just kind of mentioned with the sticky notes and all this stuff. And I the feedback from that was really nice because it was not just me talking about, hey, we could do things this which way and whatever. That it really gave us a basis internally to start talking about how we can bring more young people into the process, you know. And since we had worked with these youth for the last like 8 months before that session, they had like very in-depth things to talk about the housing and homelessness sector and like the systems and everything. And so it really never felt, the idea was like for them to not feel tokenized, and I felt like they felt very equal at the table because they knew exactly what was happening. They knew the topics and words and acronyms that we were talking about. They didn't feel left out. And so I think that's like really the great moments where it's like all the work of the last little bit comes together and people can really like feel the success of what happened. And yeah, and then also of course getting good feedback from the youth themselves. I think the approval of the youngins is definitely the priority in this work.
Amazing. Um, you led the development of AHMA's Indigenous Youth Housing Strategy. What was the most important to Indigenous youth in shaping that strategy?
So their role is to be our directors effectively. And so I kind of tried to pitch this to them as like, picture me like I'm your consultant. Like you've hired me, I'm your full-time consultant. Whatever you want this strategy to look like, I'm going to make it look like that. And we gave them this power because we felt and we feel like Indigenous youth are experts in their own experience, aka they know exactly what they want, what they need, and what their peers want and need. And so we need to give them the opportunity to share that in a way that is not tokenizing and respects their journey. Because what we find, or what we're finding people commit to, is these if we think of like the timeline of a program, you know, maybe at the beginning we'll engage youth because it's good, let's use that as the basis of our work moving forward, but then we lose that youth engagement for maybe the next 2 years in the development of the program, and then perhaps there's like a validation process on the end where we re-engage youth, hopefully the same ones from 2 years ago, if they're still youth, quote unquote, still, and then be able to kind of move forward on that. And so we wanted to demonstrate, lead by example, that you can actually bring youth throughout the whole process of a strategy, in this case, a housing strategy, and and make them feel like they were genuinely part of the process. And so what this meant was me using my decade of youth engagement to offer some mentorship around like the technical components of a housing model, and then say like, what kind of housing model would you want to have? And so, for example, of the 5, we had things like an emergency shelter that was more long-term stay. We had an affordable housing operation meant for young women who are focused on like building like a peer network, I guess, amongst themselves, like amongst the people tenanting there. We had a more rural land-based approach to housing, where like, of course, they live in a house, but it would be like much more centered around like you're surrounded by nature, trying to get out there every single day. Accommodations would be a little bit lighter. We also had somebody who integrated a clinic with a housing operation, and then of course there was kind of, in our last example, there's kind of like a theme of all of them. And so my job was to be able to receive the information that they want to say in whichever way they want to say it. So I could be like, hey, I have this template. I know what needs to be put into a housing operation, just working in the housing sector. And so what I can ask you one-to-one questions like, hey, what's this? Getting technical about eligibility criterias and all these things. Or you can just brain dump on me, and then I'll fill it out and I'll send you the notes later. And so that's what we did. And most of them just brain dumped on me, I'm going to be honest, And so that's kind of like where it's reliant a little bit on us to, be able to receive information in that way. And there was nothing in this strategy that was a surprise to these youth, because they had this constant feedback loop. I met with them every single week. And in doing this, in addition to inviting them to conferences and galas and more educational opportunities and free workshops where there's honorariums and things like this, we gathered all that learning and put it into an engagement framework for other people to do what we're doing. And so we just want to just like kind of destroy this narrative about young people need to tell us their stories, aka their challenges and traumas, in order to be in the room with strategy and policy people. Like that's not appropriate, in my opinion. I think we should be more solutions focused. And so this is our way of doing that, saying like, we're bringing the youth on. And to get to your question, this is like what the most important thing was, is like bringing the youth on, them enjoying being part of the whole process, and then being able to gift that engagement framework to the community for other people to do it. That's the most important thing.
And can you tell us, how did the youth's voices directly influence the housing models that came out of the Indigenous Youth Housing Strategy?
So everything in those housing models was directly from them. There was, anything that we needed to correct or change or something like that, we always ran it by them. And it was never like receive the information, I email them, hey, can we change this thing? We talked about it in the meeting. And my perspective is that it's okay to disagree with the youth, or if they present an idea that's maybe unchallenged, or just needs like to be built up a little bit more, bolstered out. We don't shy away from that, and I actually, there was times where I would advise against something, because of XYZ reason, but I always broke down the reason why. And I think that's the part that sometimes we miss with youth engagement, is like, we use jargon, like instead of saying like, okay, y'all, I'll see you in 2 weeks, we'll have a what we heard report for you, and we'll talk to you later. If I find myself saying something like that, I actually just kind of stop and say, hey, are you folks familiar with the what we heard report? And like you kind of, and then you break it down for them. And so we would just do that for a year. talking about all these different things. And yeah, so they directly influenced it by being the creators through and through these models, and they were approved at like in a constant feedback loop.
As I understand it, the strategy has launched, and now there's
Yeah.
advocacy for phase 2 funding to pilot these models. Why is this next phase so critical right now? Maybe share with the listeners a bit about the advocacy and what you're achieving there.
Well, I mean, they got to show us that money, like we're out here, we're talking about the need to enhance the data collection practices of young Indigenous people experiencing homelessness, because advocates and nerds like me, frankly, have a really hard time demonstrating the precarity that young people are experiencing. And so we're hoping that that's what the engagement framework will do with our future advocacy when people get interested, like, hey, how can we do something like that? And we're working with some folks who are implementing the point in time counts, and so we're hoping to increase that youth engagement. I know the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centers partnered with HSA BC this year. And they did an amazing job, and there's so much more youth data now, so like it really gives us a stronger base to kind of work from. And so secondly, with trying to accelerate the number of Indigenous youth housing options for young people, we feel like we're in a great position to do this. Our members have been operating housing for decades. They have so much commitment to their young people. Like so many of our elders, our aging population, want to be around young people. So there's a lot of motivations around youth and elder housing. And I think these are great models to kind of support the intergenerational conversations with Indigenous peoples and our teachings and things. And so it's really critical for us to have this money, because we're not like, yes, we are creating housing, but they're really pathways to independence, right? Like these young people have been going through so much, and this is one of the ways in which we can demonstrate our moral and economical commitment to the next generation in the form of a beautiful home.
And would you share with all of us, from your perspective, what does meaningful reconciliation look like in housing and homelessness systems for Indigenous youth?
Well, I think it's our role as the adults who are working in the system to create systems around these young people. I think the effectiveness of any system is truly felt by an individual when they can tell there was preparation put into their arrival, right? Like at almost every kind of thing related to retention boils down to belonging. Like they feel like this is like a place for them. And so meaningful reconciliation in these systems means that these young people don't feel like their Indigenous identity is a deficit, because oftentimes it is, systemic discrimination, racism by individuals, there's so much bias, and these young people find themselves at the mercy of those systems while being discriminated. And so meaningful reconciliation is them not having to experience those things. And it's going to take a long time. Like there's no one which way about it. But it does come down to a cultural shift within our society, right? To understand that it's a lot deeper than the discrimination of Indigenous people. There's core challenges within our systems that we need to address that are suppressing the Indigenous experience, right? And so I think we all have a place to play, or a part to play in that role. I think some people like myself can get more in the weeds of the policy, and I think there's other people who I think could just really benefit from engaging more with Indigenous people, Indigenous events, Indigenous media, go to Indigenous Fashion Week, talk to your Indigenous friends, go to your friendship center. And this is how the systems change over time, right? People just develop an understanding, and there's a human connection in all of us, and I think coming to a place of understanding is step number one.
You started already on the next question, where I wanted to ask you that for organizations or individuals that want to create better outcomes for Indigenous youth but aren't sure where to start, what's one or more practical first steps they can take? You mentioned raising the conversation. Are there others?
Yeah, please check out our engagement framework, because in this framework, we really we break down exactly how to engage with young people, not like conversations like scripts or anything like that, but more like the philosophy. We have this thing called the 6 R's of the communal approach to policy, but it could be the communal approach to anything that one organization is doing. And secondly, we also have the tools. Like in our appendix, we include things like the steering committee job description, aka what are young people actually going to want to be interested in applying for from an organization. We have a draft email template. We have our honorarium payment protocol. We have a poster that we use for our Discord server with a QR code for young people to join the conversation online for this program. And I think that looking into resources like our engagement framework, and check out other sources too. I also recommend talking to other people before we engage youth about what we learned in said engagement framework. And then we can consider what youth engagement for us would look like, right? We need to put in preparation into their arrival, going back to the systems question. And young people are going to maybe be initially interested in whatever cool offer we may have, but what's going to keep them there is that feeling of belonging, right? And so with these tools and philosophy that's laid out in the engagement framework, hopefully we can offer that feeling of belonging to them. Period.
What are the 6 R's? Do you know?
Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me, because
Okay. Where can people find them to search them?
You can find them on our website. We have an Indigenous Youth Housing Strategy website. I'm gonna pull it up right now because I have them written down. I always forget the last two. Okay, here they are. So number 1 R is respect. Never ask young people about their personal challenges. We want to focus on their strengths. Going back to young people not wanting to, not feeling like they should have to share their personal traumas to be in the room and to feel valued by people. Second is relationship. We want to prioritize building rapport before requesting anything from our young Indigenous people. Think back to reciprocal relationships, right? Indigenous teachings is ensuring that we nurture our relationships and give to them without the idea or the expectation that we will get something back, right? So we invest in them and we hope that they will invest back into us. This is why it's so important to reinforce that feeling of belonging. Thirdly is risk taking. We want to balance education with experimentation. So we didn't just offer facilitation training. We also funded the young people to do a data collection peer engagement thing. And so we gave them like $1,000 budget to operate these things. We gave them an honorarium for it for themselves. And we use that information in our strategy. And that's also found in our appendix. Reciprocity is giving without expecting anything in return, like in the form of food, honorariums, our time, the transportation we put on events, and so just giving kind of some overlapping themes amongst some of these R's. The fifth is relevance. Offer personalized mentorship. So this goes to my one-to-one mentorship with them. Not always agreeing with them and just being like, oh, I'm your consultant, whatever, I'll write it, but but saying, I disagree with this because, and this is my reason why, like, what do you think about that? And kind of working out that way. And then lastly, we have rooted, which means we must focus on the community and its leaders. So it's important to not just like tokenize people, because it's one of these weird things when we get into like young Indigenous leadership where a lot of young leaders, and myself included, I genuinely feel this way, is like if we think about the Indigenous person that residential schools wanted to create, like I'm kind of a vision for that. I mean, like I got a colonial school, colonial education. I went to Catholic school. I was baptized. I I went to a colonial college. I didn't grow up with my language. My dad is Indigenous. My mom is not. And we were like a proud Indigenous family. Like we didn't hide our identity. And my dad took me to powwows and stuff like that. But like we didn't. We really struggled to like keep in contact with like our spiritual teachings, right? And so like, and there's a lot of young people who are have the exact same experience that I had, and it's natural to look at somebody like myself or anybody in this space and be like, wow, like congrats on your success, you know what I mean? But there's that internal grief almost of like, well, yeah, but like I had to give up so much, you know what I mean? Like to fit into like this like idea of like what an Indigenous policy analyst and researcher would look like and be like, and like how we had to operate within the system in order to see success. And there's so many people who are rejecting the system, rightfully so. And so we need to ensure that we're not only focusing on young leaders and rather giving them building a whole community. And so that's what we tried to do with our Discord server, where we have about 70 young people. We only had 5 on our steering committee members, so in this case they would be the leaders. And we put on these monthly workshops, so like think things like careers, like what does a housing career in the Indigenous nonprofit housing sector look like? And so we had some panelists come on. We had the BC Office of the Human Rights Commissioner do like an Indigenous youth specific webinar on the Human Rights Code. I did one on the pre-research data for this project, just talking about the different housing operations that are available to young people across the province. And then lastly, we had one on communications, like what happens whenever something like the Indigenous Youth Housing Strategy launches. How do we communicate that, et cetera, et cetera. And this gave our leaders and alike, people in the community an opportunity to come just hang out with us and learn some stuff that we're talking about within our project, be part of this community, get $50 to attend something that's educational. And and these steering committee members, they had an opportunity to ask their friends, hey, we're doing this thing, like would you like to come? And for all the reasons I just outlined, it's like a fun thing that they get to do with their friend, plus they get to like introduce them, oh look, this is that nerd stuff I like doing, you know what I mean? Reconciliation and all this stuff. So so we want to rooted is about focusing on the community and its leaders.
Amazing. We have almost reached the end. And so before you go, I wanted to ask you if there's anything else that you'd want to share with our listeners, any last thoughts or anything that you want people to, any calls to action or thoughts that you want to leave us with.
I think I would like my conclusion message to be to think 7 generations ahead, in that there's young people watching in our sector right now. There's people coming into the workforce and people are learning and they're sponges, and it's up to us to create the environment that demonstrates like that they're welcomed. And I encourage folks to reflect on truly what are we doing for the young people. We maybe working with a young person in within our staff is maybe part of too much part of our core operations to be considered youth reconciliation and things like this, right? We need to dig a little bit deeper and think about how are we passing on our knowledge. If we're somebody in a senior level position, if we're a leader, I encourage them to write. I encourage them to share their knowledge. I would love to have so many Google pages about all these amazing Indigenous leaders that I meet. But the unfortunate reality is not a lot of them have publications, like ways in which I can learn from them, even though they're gone or they're inaccessible, right? And so I just encourage folks to offer their learnings to the young people in whichever which way they can, that's accessible to all, so we can all benefit from everyone else's expertise. So with that, miigwech, and thank you for your time, Emmy. Really happy to be here. It was great.
Thank you, Bailey, for sharing your experience with us today. And the conversation's been really helpful to remind us that meaningful change happens when individual voices are centered, collaboration is done with care and intention. And so we really appreciate you being here and for all the work you're doing to create better housing outcomes for Indigenous youth. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today and for joining us on the way home.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Amy.
Take care. Today's episode featured Bailey Waukey, Strategic Advisor for Youth Engagement and First Nations Relations, whose work centers youth voice, collaboration, and meaningful reconciliation in housing and homelessness systems. His leadership reminds us that lasting change happens when systems are built with, not just for, the communities they serve. Thank you for listening to On the Way Home, a podcast brought to you by Blue Door. Stay with us for more conversations with leaders working to create stronger, more inclusive housing futures.
You're listening to On the Way Home with your host,